Welcome to episode 3. Today, we stand on the beach. It's October in 1492. Two branches of the human family tree, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, are about to touch for the first time. To the young people watching, today we often focus on the conflict that followed, but for a brief moment in time, there was pure world-shaking wonder. If you feel like our world today is divided, remember that these two groups were more alien to each other than we could possibly imagine. Yet they found ways to communicate. The history of America is complex and flawed, but it began with an encounter that changed the physical and mental map of the world forever. Shock of the New. When Columbus's three small ships arrived in the Bahamas, they didn't find a desert. They found a paradise inhabited by the Taino people. The first misunderstanding was the most famous one. Columbus thought he was in the East Indies, so he called the people Indians. But the misunderstandings went deeper than a name. The Taino practiced deep hospitality. To them, giving gifts was a way to establish a relationship and social standing. To the Europeans, who came from a world of scarcity and strict private property, these gifts were seen as proof that the land was theirs for the taking. Two different ways of seeing value were colliding on that sand. Concept of land. One of the most profound differences was how each group viewed the earth. Most indigenous nations viewed the land as something you used but could not own. Much like we think of the air or the ocean today, you belonged to the land. The Europeans, however, came from a legal tradition where land was something you fenced, titled, and passed down as a private asset. When indigenous leaders signed treaties or gave permission for settlers to stay, they often thought they were granting a shared agreement, like a neighborly invite. The Europeans thought they were buying a deed. This wasn't necessarily malice at the very first second. It was a fundamental clash of worldviews that would take centuries to untangle. The biological exchange, or the Columbian exchange. It wasn't just people meeting, it was plants, animals, and germs. This is known as the Columbian exchange. Think about this. Before this meeting, there were no horses in the Americas, and there were no tomatoes or potatoes in Europe. While the introduction of European diseases was devastating to indigenous populations, a worse time that is hard to wrap our heads around, the exchange also brought new tools and foods that would eventually sustain billions of lives. It reminds us that every great change in history is a double-edged sword. It brings immense pain and immense new possibilities simultaneously. Understanding this helps us stay grounded when we face the messy changes of our own modern era. The first diplomatic efforts. It wasn't all immediate war. In many places, like in the early encounters of what would become Canada or New England, there were decades of middle ground. The French fur traders and the Algonquin people, for example, created a hybrid culture. They learned each other's languages, married into each other's families, and created new customs. These early years show us that humans are capable of finding common ground even when they start with nothing in common. It proves that cooperation isn't just a modern idea, it's a survival instinct that has been part of the American story since the very first ships arrived. As we finish today's episode, look at where we are. We live in a world that was built from this complicated meeting. To the young people, history isn't a fairy tale, but it isn't a horror story either. It's a human story. We see people who were brave, people who were confused, and people who were trying to build a future. We have inherited their flaws, but we also inherited their resilience. Next Saturday, we will look at the first permanent shadows and lights of the colonial era. Until then, keep an open heart and remember, we are all still learning how to talk to one another.